Assalamu alaikum. In the last video we dealt with the first 9.5 minutes of Colin video on Quranic preservation, exposing his lack of intellect and how he misinterpret and misrepresent his sources, let alone how incredibly incompetent some of his own sources are. Today, we hopefully make the final response, or maybe we continue with the multi-parts. Keep in mind, as I said last time, just because this is a multi-part video does not mean his allegations are hard to respond to, but rather there is just a lot to take down to. Now, I want to say one thing. Before we start the response, what you're about to see near the end of the final parts of the series, specifically regarding his appendix, if you speak Arabic, let alone if you are a fan of Colin, you're going to be embarrassed by this. What Colin does at the end, if not, is one of the most evident display of ignorance and stupidity. Honestly, I cannot wait to get that video done. Without further ado, let's begin. At 10 minutes and 1 second, Colin carries on from the last video with his accusation that Uthman and Al-Hajjaj revised their edition and burned the competing copies.
Uthman revised the Quran, then destroyed his sources. Al-Hajjaj revised the Quran and then destroyed competing readings.
We already dealt with that in the first video on our response to him, so we will ignore that. We already dealt with that in the first video on our response to him, so we will ignore that. At 10 minutes and 8 seconds, Colin asks about Al-Hajjaj manuscript condition. He cites the following.
Now what about Al-Hajjaj's Quran? What happened to that? Well, thankfully, when the Abbasids took over, they seemed to largely want to take credit for the Umayyads' work. So Al-Hajjaj's manuscript was given some mercy. As regards the Mus'haf of Al-Hajjaj, the Abbasids similarly attempted to replace them. In one such tradition, the third Abbasid Caliph Al-Mahdi permitted the sending of one more Mus'haf to Medina after the Mus'haf of Al-Hajjaj had been replaced. It was not destroyed, but rather put in a box on the side. It is also likely that the other codices in the major cities were no longer in use.
You know the drill better than anyone. I cannot let anything he says slip by without properly refuting it or looking through it. So the original source is this. As you can see, not a single citation apart from footnote number 238. As you can see from the source is Al-Samhudi. Al-Samhudi in his book Wafa al-Wafa bi Akhbar Dar al-Mustafa. I was able to trace the source back to this narration. Quote, Ibn Zubala, Malik ibn Anas told me, Al-Hajjaj bin Yusuf sent to the mothers of the villages with masahif. He sent one to the city with big mushaf, and he is the first to send the masahifs to the villages, and that mushaf was inside a box on the side of the desk that I worked. I know of the place of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and he used to open it the day of Friday and Thursday, and reads from it. If I pray the morning, so Al-Mahdi sent manuscripts that are 8. It was inserted in a box, and the Mus'haf of Al-Hajjaj was put aside, and so Minbar, where it was read on, and carried Mus'haf Al-Hajjaj in his book, and made it near the right side of the disk, on the right side of the Minbar. End quote. Now, if you read the source footnote, you will notice that Omar cited someone named Ibn Zubala, literally means son of garbage. So keep that name. So who is Ibn Zubala? Yes, you guessed correct. He is rejected, but not like anyone who is rejected. He is called a liar, as you can see in the screenshot shown on the screen. As you can see, the rank it says he is a liar. There is another person with the same last name who is regarded as weak. The rank is weak in hadith. I'm not sure myself, there is no date of birth, but regardless, both of these two are weak. The first is labeled a liar, the second is weak. Regardless of who Al-Samhudi is, he is citing both of them, and they are rejected. Given that the first one died at 199 Hijri, it is more than likely the last one. At 10 minutes and 46 seconds, Colin cites his isnad yet again.
So let's take all of this information back to our isnad. We have reports of all of these early readings being eliminated or prohibited by penalty of death in some cases. None of these readings appear to make it past Al-Hajjaj.
He claims none of those readings, which I assume the one he struck with a red line, made it through Al-Hajjaj. I assumed by Zayd he is referring to Zayd bin Thabit. Zayd bin Thabit has no official Mus'haf attributed to him in the first place. He was tasked with gathering the Uthmani Quran. As for Ali, I assume he's referring to Ali bin Abi Talib, which we also don't have an unofficial manuscript attributed to him. Shias claim they do have, but none presented it, as accurate as goes back to Ali. As for Uthman, we already explained his case. As for Abdullah bin Mas'ud, we do have several verses of his reading, But as we explained, we cannot trust him simply because his Mus'haf has a Shia chain of narration behind it, and given his readings is a tafsir reading, not a real Mus'haf. At 11 minutes, Colin claims that Al-Hajjaj made a complete destruction of the competing copies.
As we saw, Hajjaj carried out an extensive Quranic destruction campaign, even more so than Uthman before him. The things that happened in the turmoil of attempting to standardize a Quran in the first Muslim century actually undermined the contributions of the various authorities on which this incomplete Isnad chain rests.
But we already dealt with that in the last video, so we will also let this one slide. At 11 minutes and 20 seconds, he claims that the Caliph, who I assume he's referring to Uthman, couldn't have destroyed the competing readings, and claimed that the Islamic world was not so large and stable as Islamic tradition tells us.
Number one, the Islamic world was not so large and stable at this point as the Islamic traditions tell us. Number two, think about what happened in 1924. In the early 20th century, the shape of the Quran would have seemed anything but clear. In fact, the Egyptian government was motivated to begin the project that will lead to the Cairo Quran edition due to the variants found in the Quranic text that they had been importing for state schools. It's at this point that they standardized the Hafs version and destroyed the variant Qurans by sinking them in the Nile River. Through the following decades, this Quran quickly became the standard reading throughout the Muslim world. If Egypt could do this in 1924, why not Al-Hajjaj in the early 8th century?
He cites no sources, no evidence for this nonsense. The second reason, he cites Gabriel Said Reynolds in regards to the year 1924, given how last time we saw how Gabriel and his justifications to what he perceives as an error. I'll take once again what he says with a grain of salt. Okay, so let's take a look at page 3 citation. So much gibberish, with no evidence, yet one source cited. So let's see source 8, shall we? The source is the following. It seems that the source is German. I tried to look for it in either German or even the context in Arabic, but I couldn't find a way to access it. So let's take Gabriel as honest with his source. But then again, do we trust anything from him after what we exposed him saying lately? No. Let's take a look at his second claim, who appears to be Michael W. Albin. I couldn't verify that either, as it seems to be locked behind a paywall in Braille Library, so I decided to email him directly. Now, the reason why this video was delayed is because I was waiting for his reply, until neither in academia nor in Gmail he replied. I am sure he saw it, as I contacted him directly, so I decided to do my best and try to get these papers even if it cost me money to refute IC. The first one cannot be accessed, then the second one, of Michael, I had to pay using PayPal, which I don't have, so neither the sources are accessible and neither I was able to find anything related to them in Arabic. Given we saw how Gabriel is ready to abandon all logic and reason, I will hold my thoughts regarding this claim until it is verified. However, the closest I was able to find was the claim cited by M. Albin. That is the only source I could verify, and that Muhammad Ali he is citing is Muhammad Ali Pasha back at the year 1833 in regards to the printing of the Quran. Now, the issue here is that it was not allowed during that time because scholars believed that printing a disc used a swine leather to print on it, which of course is the most insulting thing to do to the Quran. But to be fair, I couldn't verify that claim either. We will address how each one of these. Now, the first source within the link that I was able to find has a link to PayPal account, so not even a single chance I will spend my hard-earned money to refute Colin, let alone put food in the table of the Orientalist institution that published that article. So instead, I relied on publicly available PDF that he provided. I am not gonna spend $33 just to read one source. Then I decided to use Sci-Hub and search for the edition until I was able to finally find it, that we will address it later. Now, the text you see in German, given that I cannot speak German, I asked a brother in Discord server to translate it for me since I cannot use Google Translate either. If you download the original PDF, you notice he gives 0 sources, so I assume Gabriel was referring to that specific downloadable paper. So we have here yet 2 years timeline he cited, 1929 and 1930. I tried to look for the original source in Arabic, but I couldn't find anything at all. At least the second source is verifiable. It seems that what M. Albin is referring to is Muhammad Ali Pasha prohibiting the printing of the Quran at 1833. When I looked for this claim, it seems the reason behind it is because the printing desk machine used swine leather, which of course is offensive to even think of writing the Quran on such materials, as I explained before. Quote, Dr. Ali Jum'a, the former Mufti of government, the printing entered the hand of Ali Pasha, so he created the Amiria printing factory at the year 1821 to print the manuscript, and Jum'a added in his meeting in the program God Knows Best that the scholars prohibited the printing of the Quran because they heard the desk that the paper rotate on is made of swine leather, so it is not right that the pages of the Mus'haf to be made with swine leather, so the printing was delayed to the year 1833. End quote. The article links a video interview with the former chairman and president of Al-Azhar University, Ali Jum'a, the most prestigious and respected Islamic university in the world. Now, to be fair, as I said before, no sources were given, but I would rather take the words of the president of Al-Azhar University, the most prestigious university in the world, than someone as dishonest as M. Alvin, who didn't even bother to cite the swine part. The link to the full German paper will be posted in the description, as all links will be. So once again, since I cannot speak German, I decided to ask the same brother who speaks German to look at it. But before we indulge into that, I decided to use Google Translate document to translate it entirely to English. There are some parts that was not correctly translated, like some Arabic text. Now I was able to find the only mention of a scribal error on page 4 of his publication. Again, I provided the Sci-Hub link for you can download the document and translate it yourself. If you speak German, you will probably have a better chance than me. The following are the direct translation words from page 4. Now the Arabic words he is citing as an example of a scribal error. Forget the fact that Mr. Bergstreier, who I probably just mispronounced his name, gave literally no source at all. I decided to search in Arabic to find this alleged scribal error. I could not. I think what is being referred to is the Tubingen manuscript that was allegedly dated to 1930, according to the Islamic Awareness website, which will be also linked in the description. This manuscript contains Surah 17 only, which neither the word Azizan or Nikahan exist on it. Now, what about the translation provided by the German brother? Quote, the Egyptian government used to imprint large quantities of copies of the Quran produced abroad for the students of various madrasas, but was repeatedly forced to destroy them because they contained errors. A quarter of a century ago, it once had sunk a large batch of Quran obtained from abroad into the Nile. This event had led to the decision to produce a copy of the Quran in Egypt according to Uthmanian orthography. The preparation had begun around 1907. End quote. So let's recap. The first source gives no evidence for its allegation. Then we found out that he's referring to the 1930 manuscript that contains only Surah 17, which neither of these Arabic words exist on it. And on top of that, he gives no reference, no source for his claim. If he was not referring to any manuscript, then he's more than likely referring to the Egyptian government printed the Quran and they were handing it over to the schools for students, meaning just a modern printing of the Quran, not even an old manuscript. Say for example, if I was printing the Quran today and wrote a letter wrong, I would throw it in the river. That is basically what the author is saying. It also appears to be that he's referring to the government printing of the manuscript, rather than an actual ancient Quranic manuscript. The second one he was able to trace to the original source, back to Encyclopedia of the Quran, published by Braille Journals. Part of it has to be the section written by M. Albin, which gives no direct reference to the author himself, but let's accept what he is saying now. First, as we explained, from the former president of Al-Azhar University, meaning it was not imprinted because of the swine leather. Is that it, Colin? Really? Are you kidding me? At 12 minutes and 8 seconds, Colin cites this.
Now let's look at some additional problems with Hufs. There is no unanimity over its precise shape. 4 different lines of transmission are claimed for it, and discrepancies abound in the various texts claiming to transmit it. And when it comes to discrepancies or differences within various Qurans, most Muslims simply do not have a mental framework to process such a concept. Perfect preservation has been drilled into their minds so much that they can't think clearly about this topic.
Apparently, Colin is in love with Gabriel Side Reynolds in his book. So again, as usual, let's open the original source. But let's address this. Gabriel, or rather Colin, thinks there are 4 different lines of transmission. Here is the issue. Turuq or way is when an author is narrating directly from the Rawi. So let's make it a simple flowchart. As you can see, this is how reading is passed by. But regardless, let's check the source directly. As you can see, there is not a single source or reference for this asinine claim. What does it mean by different? Is it in the title, or in affiliation, or content? Now I'm going to give you a flowchart on how the Quran qira'ah is passed by down. Now as you can see, this is how a reading is passed down. Hafs learns from his teacher, Asim, and then he narrates it down to another person who is considered a tariq or safil. This we have one way of transmission, not three different ways. This is how J. Smith manipulates his audience. He looks at three different categories, then strip away from them the line and present them as they are three different qira'ats, when in fact they are just one qira'ah passed down in a chain of narration. This is how he invented the so-called 26 different Qurans. I do realize Gabriel is not separating any of them or said each is independent, but he didn't bother to give any evidence for his claim. Moving on, at 12 minutes and 40 seconds, Colin starts to speak about the ahruf or qira'ats. At 12 minutes and 45 seconds, Colin says that he has no idea what ahruf is.
And so when most Muslims encounter differences or variants within different Qurans, they'll simply wave them off as ahruf or qira'at. So let's talk about these two terms. Let's start with ahruf. What are ahruf?
Well, let me educate you now. Well, you know what? No. Let's see how you explain it.
I have absolutely no idea.
Why didn't I think of that? Because you're an idiot. No, don't be like that. Practically everyone is.
Let's see his sources. So he is citing Yasir Qadi, who in turn gives no reference to his claim as shown here. So I decided once again to do Colin's job and look for the claim. Now Yasir is probably referring to Abu Ja'far Muhammad bin Sa'dan al-Kufi al-Dharir, the one who claimed that no one knows its meaning except Allah. But I was unable to find or verify what Ibn Sa'dan is actually saying. The closest I found is that he himself doesn't know its meaning. Now yes, the previous citations of the difference between 53 opinion and 40 opinion do exist. However, the question now is, what are these 53 opinions or 41? Who is citing them? Well, that simply means they are debating the meaning of the title, and Al-Sayyuti actually lists these 40 meanings, meaning they are not different in the content of the 7 ahruf. Rather, they are differing in the meaning of the title, the 7 ahruf, or what does the word ahruf is. They are not debating the content or the verses that are recited within these readings. They are just talking about the word ahruf or what it means. At 13 minutes and 14 seconds, Colin says that Muslim scholars were free to speculate on the meaning of the 7 ahrufs and makes up a conspiracy theory that any variant appears, they will just use this word as a scapegoat.
So Muslim scholars were free to speculate. And speculate they did. But modern Muslims know exactly what ahruf are. They're a convenient label to put on any variant in the Quran that you don't want to talk about.
But we don't care about your opinion, Colin, unless you have sources to back it up. Moving on, at 13 minutes and 28 seconds, Colin starts to talk about the qira'at.
Let's move on to qira'at, where things are much more clear. Qira'at, or readings, are part of the history of the text, not its starting point. The idea of different yet equally canonical qira'at did not develop before the 10th century, when great divisions over the Quranic text led Ibn Mujahid, among others, to sponsor this regulatory concept. He argued that there are 7 equally valid qira'at. Others argued for 10 or 14. The gradual acceptance was 7 qira'at, but that was generally accompanied with a caveat that each qira'ah has 2 versions. Effectively then, 14 different versions were considered equally authentic, only one of which was Hafs. Now, if any of this has been confusing for you, let me make it simple. The Quran has been perfectly preserved. If this were a book, we would now be in the appendices.
Once again, he cites Gabriel Said Reynolds. I'm not sure why Colin keeps on using him, but nevertheless, here is the source. Once again, we are presented with only one source. Okay, so basically he gives no direct quotes, but let's check the reference he provided this author, and he's called Christophe Malchart. His article is 19 pages. Basically, Gabriel is asking us to read the entire article. However, to save you the time, not only I will provide you the link, so you read it on its entirety and not accusing me of hiding anything, but also I will straight up jump to the relevant part. It is found on page 18. As you can see, pages 18 to 20 are basically the relevant topics Gabriel is talking about. Apparently, he is citing two sources, sources 72 and 73, but let's see source 71. Of course, the source is not even a Muslim source. I tried to find it, and it is a Braille journal. The only way to access it is via a subscription fee. I was unable to find a way access around it, so instead I decided to go around it and see if there are any other way I can get it. He is citing Alfred T. Welch. I was thankfully able to find another source that cites a similar claim. So basically, Welch is saying that Ibn Mujahid chose 7 well-known Quran teachers. The further I dive deep, the harder for me to find the second edition of the encyclopedia. So instead, I decided to find the claim in Arabic, and the closest I was able to find was the following Arabic article: Ibn Mujahid al-Tamimi والمنهج التعليمي للقراءة القرآنية by Ahmad Muhammad al-Qadhat, which translate to Ibn Mujahid al-Tamimi and the educational methodology of Quranic qira'ats by Ahmad Muhammad al-Qadhat. This author referenced al-Mujahid book al-Sab'a fi al-Qira'at, the 7 in Qira'at. I decided to find the book, then did my research. Lo and behold, nowhere did he said his findings alone are divine, based on the famous hadith by the Prophet, peace be upon him, about the 7 qira'at. In fact, Ibn Mujahid doesn't even mention that hadith in his book at all. So instead, I decided to see if he had any other relevant works that he do mention it in it. Again, I failed to find any mention of the hadith among the works of Mujahid. So where the hell did Alfred Welch came up with these? Let alone, where the hell do these Orientalists make up these claims? Now I know I have no quarrel with the 7 readings being divine. In fact, they are divine, since they are revealed by God. That is not my issue. My issue is, why do Orientalists make up stuff attributed to these scholars? How dishonest is the Orientalist community? Now, going back, the first source is, quote, and Abdul Wahid bin Abi Hashim, a man asks Ibn Mujahid, why won't you choose for yourself a harf for you? He said, we encourage ourselves to memorize what passed us from our imams better than us, to choose a single harf for those who come after us to read, end quote. Regardless of the identity of that unknown man and how he makes the narration weak, let's concede for a moment that this narration is authentic. So what? He's basically saying, we will not focus on one harf, but rather memorize what our imams have taught us. Now, we wrapped up the end to part 2. More to come, and even the best is yet to come. I decided to make it a multi-part video, since the original script is 49 pages long. Of course, that will be bad to make it into one video, a 49 pages long script in one video. Please make sure to share this video far and wide. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.